Well, it's a beautiful Friday morning to be back alive. Of course, a brand new day, another opportunity for us to sit pretty on the radio. Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to the round table. It is live and exclusive to Clean Beat 91.5 FM. We're back today for yet another edition of the round table where we sit to have particular conversations around issues of national and, of course, public interest. And Fridays, we double down on the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. We call it Abuja Square, where we talk about issues surrounding the FCT. We look at pressing concerns of residents of the FCT. And of course, today promises to be exciting and, of course, insightful. My name is Isaac. Isaac, excited to be back today for another edition of the Roundtable Abuja Square, particularly today, by the way. It's the 17th of July 2026. And just in case you're joining for the first time, the roundtable comes up every day, Mondays through Fridays, 8:30, and we coast all the way to 9:30 a.m., sometimes 10, depending on the extent of the conversation. And you can always be a part of what's happening right here. All you have to do is call us up in time. Our phone lines are now open and buzzing. The phone lines are 090-3000-6915. You can also text us on WhatsApp. Of course, the WhatsApp line is 090-3000-5915. And definitely, you can be a part of our evergreen community of fans and followers. Just head to our social media pages: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and X at CleanBeat 915 FM. We're also on YouTube. Just search for CleanBeat 91.5 FM and you get to see our content there. You can also stream our videos live, our interviews live, our programs live, and see what we look like, the voices, the faces behind the voice is right. And of course, our website is also there for you, www.cleanbeat915fm.com. And of course, you have several channels of connecting with us and being a part of what's happening here. As usual, as we always do traditionally, we start the roundtable with a look at what's happening at the front pages of our national dailies, and that's what we're doing right now. We're going to be looking at what's trending in the front pages of our national dailies. And if you want to contribute your thoughts on any of the stories we'll be looking at from the newspaper review, you can just call us up and we'll take your call, send us a WhatsApp message. We'll definitely take them as they come. But once again, welcome to the show. All right, kickstarting the newspaper review segment this morning from the Punch newspaper. There's a big story here that says states defy Supreme Court's control 10 trillion naira local government allocations. That story can be found on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. The local government autonomy conversation has spanned for 2 years plus, even not 3 years right now, despite a Supreme Court's ruling mandating states to let local government areas control their funds. Unfortunately, some states are still handling local government funds and, just cutting it, dividing it, so to speak, rationing it, if you like, to local government areas, despite what the president has said and despite, what the Supreme Court had ruled, and it remains a conversation. 2 years after that Supreme Court's judgment, state still defy that. And it's a concern, if you ask me. But for more of that story, of course, you can find it on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. There's a story here that says, it's a bit of good news, by the way. It says, Kogi rescues abducted principal. NECO official, 2 students. Kogi rescues abducted principal. NECO officials, 2 students. That story can be found on page 7 of the Punch newspaper. By the way, if you can remember last week, we talked about the abduction incident in Kogi State where students were writing their NECO examinations, and of course, a known gunman came in and abducted a few of them, 3 students, a NECO official, and a principal. And in the course of that abduction incident, 1 student had escaped. And it's good news. It's delightful to know that they've all been rescued. Kudos to the Nigerian security architecture who, of course, championed this rescue mission. Another story here at the top of the Punch front page says 2027 election. INEC unveils mock presidential poll plan. 2027 elections, INEC unveils mock presidential poll plan. That story can be found on page 7 of the Punch newspaper. This one says Tinubu approves Lagos-Ibadan Expressway reconstruction. That story, of course, can be found on page 9 of the Punch newspaper. Finally, I don't know if I should say I saved the best for the last, but at the top of the front page of the Punch, there's a story that piques my interest. It says Senate bans preaching, hawking in commercial buses. I take that again. Senate bans preaching, hawking in commercial buses. I wouldn't say much on this story, but if you want to get the details, you can find it on page 10 of the Punch newspaper. All right, let's look at the Vanguard newspaper this morning. Their issue for Friday, July 17, 2026. All right. Well, the big story here says PFIPC. Baja slams 15 billion suit against Adeyemi. There's a kicker. It has a few kickers that say allegations cause grave damage to my personal professional reputation. This is according to the chief of staff to the president, of course, Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, who has now slammed 15 billion suit against Adeyemi, the self-styled chairman of the PFIPC, which the presidency has said is a commission that does not exist. By the way, of course, Prince Adeyemi is in police custody as we speak to you. For more of that story, you can find it on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. All right, the story here says Achimugu court grants final forfeiture of 4.6 billion naira jewelry, 4.3 billion naira exotic cars, $50,000, 30 million naira to federal government. That story can be found on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. This one says importers to increase depot petrol price to 1,350 naira. That story can be found on page 28 of the Vanguard newspaper. Okay, this one piques my interest. It says U.S. Congress cuts aid to Nigeria by 50% over Christian persecution. That story can be found on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper. All right, for more of this, go grab your copy. And as I always say, get yourself informed. Let's look at the Nigerian Tribune newspaper this morning for the issue for Friday, July 17, 2026. The big story here says Appeal Court revalidates INEC timetable on 2027 elections. Appeal Court revalidates INEC timetable on 2027 elections. That story can be found on page 21 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. All right. This one says new bill proposes 100,000 naira fine for traffic offences. New bill proposes 100,000 naira fine for traffic offences. That story can be found on page 12 of the Nigerian Tribune. Let's look at the top of the front page of the Tribune. This one says CPPE worries over renewed acceleration in food inflation. That story can be found on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune. A bit of a sad story here at the front page of the Tribune says 2 killed, several injured in Osogbo shooting as police launch investigation. For more of the story, you can find it on page 17 of the Tribune newspaper. And finally, before we move on to another paper this morning, this one says foreign reserves now $52 billion. This is according to the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Foreign reserves now 52 billion naira. Of course, a statement credited to CBN Governor Olayemi Cardoso. So, of course, for more of that story, go grab yourself a copy and get yourself informed. Okay, so we're leading you straight to the Leadership newspaper this morning. The front page of the Leadership has a few interesting stories that will, of course, pique your interest. This one says INEC malls mock presidential election ahead of 2027 polls. And of course, the story can be found on page 2 of the Leadership newspaper, at the very top of the Leadership. A story here says NAS ticket losses. APC governor's loyalist commence legal battle against National Working Committee and INEC. APC governor's loyalist commence legal battle against National Working Committee, INEC. That's where it can be found on page 2 of the Leadership newspaper. Well, the internal wranglings of the ruling party seem to have ended because, of course, we know that a lot of hearts were broken during the primaries, especially senatorial primaries, where some people who, of course, some candidates who had brimmed with confidence that they were going to secure the party's ticket did not secure the party's ticket. Some moved to other political parties, some stayed in the party and are willing to fight for their place. So we're going to see how that turns out in the next couple of days. Elections are just by the corner, less than 8 months before we see the next general election. So it's going to be interesting to see how the ruling party, the APC, of course, would walk around the aggrieved members, especially those who lost tickets for different positions. Well, time definitely is going to tell. A story here says Damawa man gets 30-year jail term for impregnating daughter. A really sad story there, an unfortunate one as well. Pretty sad. Page 4 will give you details of that very sad story. All right, before we move on to another story, another paper rather, this one says Nigeria needs shift from politics of domination to service. Nigeria needs shift from politics of domination to service. This is according to the former governor of CBN and current Emir Sanusi. The story can be found on page 2 of the Leadership newspaper. Well, it's raining, but there's a Daily Sun here for us to look at. So let's look at the Daily Sun newspaper, the front page. And a big story here says terrorism. U.S. reps move against Nigeria. Pass bill to withhold assistance until terror attacks are addressed. All right. For more of the story, you can find it on page 6 of the Daily Sun newspaper. All right. This one says, dead people's names remain on INEC's record. This is according to the chairman of INEC, Professor Joshua Mupiton. It says, dead people's names remain on INEC's records. That story can be found on page 21 of the Daily Sun newspaper. 210 trillion naira missing funds, claim false. NAPIC's MGM tells, ex-GM rather, tells Senate. 210 trillion naira missing funds claim false. This is according to the NAPIM ex-GM. And of course, it relates to the NNPCL and the conversations around that. And it remains a thing. And of course, for more of that story, by the way, you can find it on page, let's confirm that, page 20 of the Daily Sun newspaper. Of course, the National Petroleum Investment Management Services, NAPIMS, the ex-GM of that council, that commission, of course, it's speaking. And yeah, we'll talk about that. If you want more of that story, of course, you can find it on page 25, rather, of the Daily Sun newspaper. Let's look at the Nation newspaper this morning. The front page has some interesting stories. This one says 6 months to presidential poll. INEC raises preparation tempo. This, of course, it's about the mock presidential poll. It'll make sense, in my opinion. It'll make sense so that the Electoral Commission, INEC, would use that mock poll to cross T's, dot I's. There's a lot of expectation from INEC in the coming elections. And, of course, this mock poll would help them to assess a lot of things, especially the conversations around electronic transmission of votes, accreditation of voters, and all of those technical issues that they faced in the last election. So this mock poll should help them fix that. Kudos to INEC, by the way. All right. The story here says Tinubu launches $3.05 billion poverty reduction plan. That story can be found on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. All right, finally, let's monitor the daily monitor this morning before we get into an expanded conversation. All right. A big story here says our appeal court validates our next 2027 election guidelines. We've talked about it. A story here says Oyedele courts businesses, investors to deliver Nigeria's $1 trillion economy. Okay, for more of the story, you can find it on page 4 of the Daily Monitor. Courts to deliver judgment in Turaki-led PDP suit against INEC. Others today. That story can be found on page 4 of the Daily Monitor newspaper. Of course, the leadership crisis of the PDP has been an age-long conversation, so we'll wait to see what happens today at the end of the ruling. Well, would monitor most definitely. Story here says Obi prioritizes education, healthcare in second phase of New Nigeria. That story can be found on page 5 of the Daily Monitor newspaper. All right, so that's it for the newspaper review this morning. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we'll get into the expanded conversation. Like we told you when we started, it'll be Abuja Square. We'll be talking about an issue that started last week, and would expand the conversation, take it a notch further this morning. And it of course relates and affects residents of the FCT. It's a concerning matter, and it affects me even personally. So I mean, I might be really emotional talking about it. I'll try not to be, of course, but do also stick around, and of course, to be a part of it, you know the drill. We'll read out the phone lines for you on the WhatsApp line when we come back from this very short break. Please do well to stick around.
Life in Abuja comes with its rhythm. We amplify it. We celebrate it. We broadcast it all day long. Clean Beat, 91.5 FM.
I am Brigadier General Mohammed Boob Amarua, retired, Chairman, Chief Executive Officer of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. To my young people, your talent is greater than drugs. Protect your future. Stay drug-free. Keep flexing with Clean Beat 91.5 FM Abuja.
Thank you so much for sticking around. This is still Clean Beat 91.5 FM Abuja, where music, of course, meets clarity. This is particularly the Clarity Starter, the round table where we sit pretty to have conversations around issues of public interest and, of course, national interest. So in case you're joining for the first time, the round table comes up Mondays through Fridays, 8:30, where we sit and have conversations of national interest. And today, every Friday, of course, we double down on the FCT. We talk about issues affecting the Federal Capital Territory. And that's what we're going to be doing this beautiful morning. My name, of course, is Isaac. Excited as always to be in the driver's seat, if you like. And I will be driving the conversations from here. To be a part of what's going on right here, you can reach us on WhatsApp 090-3000-5915. Our phone lines are now up and running. Yes, our phone lines are 090-3000-6915. So you have, several options, to reach us this morning. You can also head to YouTube and watch this particular program live. You see what I look like. You see what our guest looks like as well this beautiful morning. Okay, let us get into the meat of the matter. Housing remains one of the biggest concerns of residents of the Federal Capital Territory. Over the past few years, the cost of renting a home in Abuja has risen sharply and has forced many families to either relocate, downsize, or spend a significant portion of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. In last week's conversation, we talked about tenant rights, rent increases, eviction procedures, and the legal protections available to both landlords and tenants. Well, for today, we're taking the conversation a notch further. Our focus for today would be on tenement rates and rent determination. How exactly is rent fixed in Abuja? What factors should determine what a tenant should pay as rent? What are tenement rates? Who pays them? And do they contribute to the rising housing cost? And of course, is the current system fair to both landlords and tenants? Is there a need for reforms that could bring transparency and affordability in the housing sector in the FCT? These are questions that affect virtually everybody. Whether you're a tenant, you're a landlord, property developer, estate agent, or simply just planning to rent a house in the future, these conversations affect all and sundry. And to help us unpack these issues, we're joined again by Mr. Lagi Innocent Esquire. Of course, he's a respected legal practitioner with over 2 decades of experience in law, governance, and human rights advocacy. He has served as Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Nasarawa State, represented Wamba constituency in the State House of Assembly, and remains actively involved in promoting justice, electoral reform, and public policy. He joins yet again to shed light on the legal, economic, and practical realities of rent determination and property taxation in the FCT. Good morning. I'd love to call you honorable because once an honorable, always an honorable. Welcome, Mr. Lagi Innocent.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Isaac. I'll still prefer Mr.
Lagi.
Yeah.
It's great to have you join us again, to have this conversation. Over the course of last week, of course, was when, this conversation started. And it's a broad conversation that one episode of the program might not be able to eat it through. So that's why we're having, more like a second half, of this conversation. The FCT, by the way, has witnessed a sharp rise in housing cost over the past couple of yes, it's been driven by a lot of factors that which we're going to talk about in the course of this conversation. And beyond rent itself, many tenants have made to face additional charges, one of which is tenement rate. Some people still do not understand what it is and what it entails, who should pay. So let's start from there. What exactly is a tenement rate?
Tenement rate is a tax, actually, for maintenance of the city. It's a local government tax that goes towards financing maintenance of the city by the area councils, for example, in the FCT. Yeah.
All right. You've talked about.
I need to say that it is actually basically chargeable on the person who is using the tenement. Right. So it's basically a tenant rent. It's tenant rate.
So it means it's a tenant that should pay the tenement rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
It's the person who is in the tenement that pays the tenement rate.
Now the conversations now come, to how are these rates calculated? Because the tenement rates, I hear it differs depending on the property you're renting, where you're staying and all of that. So how are these rates calculated? Is there a standard formula to tenement rate?
I think there's a criteria for assessing tenement rate, and there are regulations in the AMAG bylaws that prescribe how that is done. A district is considered. Facilities within that district is considered, the income level of the residents in those areas are also considered in determining what is tenement rate. In any case, I think you should also consider, I don't know if it is there now, the services that are being provided in those areas, determining how much who pays and for what.
All right, let's double down on rent determination, because personally, that's an aspect of this conversation that I really want us to talk about. Rent determination. What factors? Because I was reading something from the National Bureau of Statistics a few days ago, and I hear that housing remains one of the largest contributors to the inflation basket of the country.
Absolutely.
Most recently as well, because the demand for housing continues to outstrip supply, unfortunately, especially in the FCT. So let's talk about rent determination. What factors do you think should legitimately determine the rent of a property?
It depends on what we mean by legitimate. and it also depends on who we're speaking with. Um, Rising cost is a rising cost. Uh, Property investment is as good as Coca-Cola investing in soda.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the second
So
time you're making this.
yes.
Yeah.
So there are no subsidies, for example, for anybody who is buying a property or building a land in the FCT at the moment, and I think across the country. Now, real estate is a pretty solid, secured investment that drives a lot of people into it. And it's safer. You have a property, value keeps going up. At least in this country, we haven't gotten to the point that we are beginning to have the housing bubble. So prices of investment in real estate keeps going up. Now, it's with much demand in that particular investment also goes the prices of setting up that investment or investing in that sector. So
yeah.
the issue is, will the government look at housing as a social issue that requires specific regulation, specific concern? Yes. What is driving profit and what is driving patronage in the FCT particularly could be attributed to the opportunities that people think do exist here, the facilities, social amenities that are better in the FCT, the crisis in various parts of the country where top class, middle class persons are relocating almost on a permanent basis because they can afford to do that. Was the FCT prepared for it? No. People feel the FCT is better, it's more secure than their communities, and everybody is being driven by security and the opportunities in the FCT. So there's almost nothing you can do about this human situation unless you try to make it better. People don't go home at all. People used to travel for weekends. They don't do that anymore. So
I think you've brought us a conversation because you mentioned that real estate is becoming a pretty interesting investment.
it has always been, but then now there's a rise in it in the FCT.
Absolutely, in the FCT particularly, which makes, I think it contributes significantly to GDP, national resources and all of that. So with that in mind, isn't it time for the government to begin to regulate, monitor, how rents are fixed, especially like you mentioned in the FCT, because there are the loads of advantages seen in the FCT, the opportunities therein. You mentioned security amongst other things. So isn't it time for the government to, of course, properly, intentionally, if not diligently, regulate how rents are fixed, in the FCT?
I think it's fair that we have to have thresholds. It's basic. I mean, we are a nation of laws. We are governed by laws.
Absolutely.
We are created by laws. We exist to abide by laws. Now, it will be important that for every social aspect of our communities, or economic, social, political aspect, all of these issues are regulated. We have pre-election matters now. Federal High Court is bringing practice direction. All the courts are bringing practice direction because of the need to deal with the exigencies of the time. Should we worry about the economic situation in the country that drives cost? Yes. Does it affect everybody? Yes. Does it make the government not to sleep? Yes. So I think the problem we have is we are always trying to manage crisis instead of preventing crisis. Why should we be thinking about it now as if we do not know this was going to happen when
In the
it started
first place?
happening?
Absolutely.
The Recovery of Premises Act has an important provision that empowers the minister, for example, to determine by an order, not necessarily another legislation, the applicability of the Recovery of Premises Act. So Kubwa, for example, can be exempted from the application of the Recovery of Premises Act. Now, it's not everything that you legislate. You don't legislate price For example, because of how difficult it is to amend laws or make new laws, and then businesses do not like that kind of regulations. Deals are conducted when the indicators are right. You don't have to send a bill to the National Assembly, first reading, second reading, come back to the president before you change price. That is a little too much. But you can make a legislation, for example, that empowers either the minister or the area council to determine rent on the basis of certain criteria. You also cannot give a blanket power. If you do, they will run the real estate business down, and then what you will have in future is the scarcity of even the houses to let. So, I mean, assuming housing is very cheap in the FCT and everybody moves to the FCT and nobody is insensitized to invest in real estate, you can also understand that we won't be talking about cost now. We'll be talking about
availability.
Yes. So governance is such a big deal. It's just not political. It's work. But I do not think, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, our government look at the titles, the privileges, and ignore the tax and responsibility that comes with all of those privileges and titles. And that is where we are.
Right. But we'll talk about the government as this conversation progresses, because of course you've been in the government too. I'd love to ask a few more practical questions with regards to this. But let's come back to the conversations of landlord and tenant away from the government. You've mentioned that it'll be almost impracticable for the government to legislate particular prices, rents fixed, for properties. But most often and always, most landlords do not give explanations or justifications for why a property is at a particular rate. They just tell you, oh, this rent is, say, 15 naira, for instance. Don't you think that we should get to a point where landlords are required to explain or justify the basis for the rents they charge?
And I agree with you, and I think that should also be regulated. As I said, there is just certain parameters upon which you do what you do. I mean, there's a reason why we eat breakfast, eat lunch, and eat dinner, and we don't consume all of them in the morning for good reason. So if there is overpricing and it affects, when you overprice and overprofit from any particular business, there is a victim who is the consumer, especially when such business is a monopoly. For example, in the FCT right now, private enterprise is the 95% or 99% of the provider of accommodation in the FCT. The federal government used to provide staff quarters, but they sold them out, and then you throw them back into the hands of the private sector. All the development in the FCT is done by private people, which is, I think that is really undesirable. And I say this, I don't want the property developers to feel bad about this, but I do not think that if we want to achieve the objective we want to achieve in terms of affordable housing in the FCT, government shouldn't develop. It's in a city like the FCT where allocation of land is basically to individuals who may never develop them or may develop them at some cost, and it's not beneficial to the rest of the community. I think we should have more developers develop estates and sell them out to people who can afford it, instead of having individuals having small allocations and then getting a fair distribution of the opportunities in terms of accommodation in the FCT is becoming a problem because
I like how you've been able to talk about the reality, what is and what should actually be, right? So, but in the context of what is right now, with the fact that more and more private individuals are developing the city, owning properties and leasing them, renting them out, to individuals, how much of this current reality has affected, the rate of house rent in the FCT? And looking at the next 5 to 10 years, how much of a problem will it be for middle income earners? For instance, the minimum wage right now, 70,000 naira. So in the next 5, 10 years, how many if the minimum wage still
Minimum
stays
wage is not for the middle class. You can't have that one. So
low class, yeah.
I worry. I
Yeah.
worry when you make that classification.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to bring it to the bare minimum. For instance,
Yes.
you know, let's say a man who earns 100,000 naira. Let's give it 100,000 naira,
Yeah.
for instance. If minimum wage still sticks at 100,000 naira in the next 5 years,
Yeah.
how many people would be able to comfortably earn, a place in the FCT, and rent a comfortable place in the FCT in the next 5 years with the way things are going?
And let me start by saying everybody need not own a house in the FCT. We can only tenement our stay in the FCT. When we retire, we move back to our retirement places, which will be fabulous. Now, there has to be control about everything. I mean, price control, it's not a capitalist idea. But price regulation, different from control, can be desirable. And let me explain. Let me see if I can explain that. Where there is rise in inflation, ordinarily you should expect that there should be rise in the income of persons to meet the challenge of inflation. Now,
Absolutely.
there are inflation that is driven by purchasing power, and the rest of them. Sometimes you cut interest rate, raise interest rate to be able to have that balance. Now, if we can do that about the general economy, we can actually have criteria for determining what tenement is. So if we, for example, determine that the minimum amount of profit you can make without certain incentive is 10-20%, I mean, government does that with every government contract that is awarded. And if contractors don't have a problem with the determination of what you can be a legitimate profit from any contract, you should be able to, the rest of the community should be able to be comfortable with a determination as to the rate of interest. You can have 100% interest. You can, but will it be fair to community if you have 100% return on investment at any short term? I don't think so. Property business is a long time recoverable investment.
Venture,
you invest 300 million in a house. How much are you going to charge per rent per annum? How long will you wait until your
get your
investment
capital
get
back,
back
yeah.
before you then begin to make profit? All of this are consideration on the terms of business. But if we have, for example, the basis upon which we assess and determine tenement rate in the FCT, which is payable to councils for the maintenance of the city, and we also have for ground rent, for example, which is a determinant rent for the use of the land by the federal government in the FCT. I think we should be able to also use about the same criteria. I started mentioning it last week. So let's say, for example, when you have a right of occupancy, it indicates how much investment you're supposed to make on that particular piece of land. It's been outdated, never been reviewed. So you still have allocations that tell you just invest 5 million.
And
You can't.
not in the current economic realities.
You can't even pay compensation for economic trees on that. So if that is not realistic, it simply means the government is also not having the data and the statistic to make the determinations we are expecting it to do. So if, for example, we can realistically be able to say, I give you 1,000 square meters of land, I know practically currently that you will require the minimum of 400 or 500 million to build that kind of
fix that, yeah.
Now, we should be able to say, using the parameters we have set, realistic parameters as to the cost of investment, to say, look, you can take 500% over and above what we are giving you as ground rent, as tenement per square meter, using the same criteria, but we just raise it
a bit higher.
Now, yes. Now, that will take into consideration the reality of your investment, take into consideration the reality of your 99-year tenure, and then we can be able to say you can, make even.
Yeah. Mr. Lagi, I want us to take a short break, but this conversation, has been basically the government and landlords, the government and landowners, particularly. I'd love us to talk a bit about, the tenants, right? Because take it or leave it, I think that the final consumers of whatever happens at the top, whatever negotiations and dealings that landlords have with the government and whatever agreement, the tenants somehow enjoy or suffer, as the case may be.
Suffers
So
most of the time.
exactly in the current economic realities, the tenants suffer, unfortunately. So is there anything, are there any successful models that the government can use, can adopt, maybe from Sena climes, that would not just aid landlords, but also tenants?
It's You don't have a lot of control about that. Housing internationally is driven by need. It's also
Mm,
driven by cost. It's
mm,
also driven by urbanization. The reliefs government do in the UK and in the US are to build public housing to cater for, and then compete with the private sector in terms of trying to bring down prices. But I mean, around here, you have to seek local solutions to this generally. And if it is a social issue, you have to just step in and then do what you have to do. You cannot, as I said, if you kill the incentive of doing housing business, nobody will build for you. And the
mm.
government has not been successful internationally in providing free housing. It has never been. I don't have. Uh,
Unfortunately.
I think it's not supposed to be a government business.
Mm.
Government intervention in our lives should not excessively exceed regulation. Uh, Giving out food, government responsibilities entirely regulation, protection.
No intent to digress in this conversation, Mr. Lagi. But of course, like you mentioned, some solutions are social issues. They are geography specific, if you like. In the current, state of our country, unfortunately, as I said earlier, the government happens to provide, they happen to provide certain basic amenities that go beyond just regulation, like you mentioned. So, if that's the status quo as of today, why not the government continue to provide until we get to that point where, of course, it's for people to afford certain things, and then we can stick to regulation. I see you're laughing.
Uh, Government resources are also determined by economies. There is a government international economics
Mm.
where the government makes money. There is basically taxes, which is the major source of government's income. And I'll discuss taxes. Now, taxes are not government's money. They are contribution towards the maintenance of community, and we put that trust in the
Hands
hands
of
of
the
a few.
government, yeah.
So you keep the money, you do a budget, and you do sewage for us, you do roads for us, you box us to walk and back.
Mm.
Now, but the problem we have is the personalization of public property, public income by our government itself. Now, the FCT thinks that every resource and everything that is being done in the FCT is a favor to the residents of the FCT. Our state governments think that they do us favors by managing and holding in trust resources meant for the state for the benefit of the population.
Provided by taxpayers.
Even if it is not provided by taxpayers, if
Mm.
it is not only provided by taxpayers, even this income from natural resources,
Mm.
they are the resources for the population and not for the government. So what you have is, for as long as we will let our government think they are doing us a favor by providing or discharging the trust for which they are handsomely paid and have a lot of privileges for doing, we'll never get this right.
Mm.
I give you an example. It is hellish to transmute from Maraba Nyanya axis into the FCT. Same with doing that from Suleja
Yeah.
axis, Zuba. Same with doing that from Kubwa. The dangers in terms of taking the small taxis and the rest of them is incredible. People have died, lawyers have been killed, and I get that. My lawyer had been attacked, and then and we still sit there and wonder why everybody wants to move to the city. We all move to the city for the same reason: better environment, better security, better services.
Mm.
Now, If you can provide this everywhere else, and it takes you less than 30 minutes in Sena climes to commute, to walk and back.
It wouldn't be a problem.
Yes, and if you have, I mean, if everybody commutes back to Kubwa and the businesses that run in town begin to run in Kubwa, people won't come to Grand Square in town if there's a replica in
That's in
Kubwa.
Kubwa.
And we have seen these communities pick up as communities for themselves. People live in Kubwa, go back from work, and their entire lives are beginning to be serviced by the communities they stay in. But what do you do in the morning when you're coming to work? How do you commit to work? In Sena climes, people come an hour in a train, finish what you're doing, and go back. Then you don't need to worry about. We will never, ever be able to provide all the accommodation for everybody that wants to come to the city within the city.
All right.
We can come to the city, but then I do not think we can house everybody who wants to come to the city in the city. So we have to innovate. You can't innovate by creating hardship. The incentive for moving backwards to cheaper areas where realistically we can build cheaper, we have the space to build cheaper, we have the opportunity to build what we want to build, will cost money. Government needs to invest in Maraba, not necessarily because it's Nasarawa State, but because it takes up about 40% of the workforce that comes.
No, intend to cut you short, Mr. Lagi, not just Maraba, maybe the outskirts of the FCT.
Absolutely.
So, parts of the town that are not called the town.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, they are not called the town because the things that are in the town
are not there. Yeah, I totally understand
and we cannot, we keep saying we're growing, but this is our indications that we're not growing at all.
Right. We'll take a short break here. When we come back, we'll talk about the role of housing agents, the ethical responsibility. What?
Don't go there. There are no ethics in business.
We'll talk about this and so much more when we come back from this short break. Thank you. Stick around.
Every voice deserves to be heard. Because we are ladies, we come first.
We're not just playing what's trending.
And if you jack up, all I want is your love. Who's that girl? Who's that girl? What's poppin'? Say love me, you ain't for me, Chanel. I'm dripping.
We're shaping the trend, setting the pace, and keeping Abuja moving. Clean Beat, 91.5 FM.
Thank you for sticking around. Of course, this is still the round table. It's live and exclusive to Clean Beat, 91.5 FM. In case you're joining for the first time, the roundtable comes up Mondays through Fridays, 8:30. For CTI, we have particular conversations around issues of national and public interest. And today, Abuja Square, we're doubling down on the FCT, talking about the housing issues and the conversations around affordability, tenement rates, rent determination, and of course, we're trying to find solutions, practical solutions, to get to a point where this rapid urbanization in the FCT does not become a problem for us in the FCT. My name is Isaac, by the way, and of course I'm joined by Mr. Lagi Innocent Esquire to have these conversations. To be a part of this conversation, you have questions to ask, you have anything, any concern that relates to the subject matter, you can send us a WhatsApp message at 090-3000-5915. You can also call us up. The phone line is 090-3000-6915. I take that again. WhatsApp is 090-5915. And call line is 090-3000-6915. 090-3000-6915. All right, Mr. Innocent, well, you had put a pause on that conversation of ethics, and it has to do with business. I want to really start from there. The housing agents, they remain a huge part of the value chain of, in the housing business particularly. And some of them are as powerful as determining rent of certain properties in the FCT. Now, some state governments have made efforts to track the activities, regulate the activities. I've heard of Lagos State or your state, Ebonyi State, and a few of them who have decided to double down on these housing agents because they've been issues of extortion and the rest of them. Walk us through the role of housing agents and what role have they played, to bring us to where we are at this moment in this time.
Realtors are businesses that just don't have control, unfortunately. But then, like every other person that opens a shop, they have opened shop. It's not illegal to be a realtor, to do the business of estate, leasing, subleasing, sales, and the rest of them. It's an internationally old known business. There's really nothing wrong with what they do.
Well, the conversations are now, I think, due to a lack of regulation, so to speak, they've become larger than life. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine wanted to get a property somewhere around Dusal Haji, for instance, and the property was given by the owner of the owner of the property had given everything, rent determination, pricing to the agent, but he had also told the agent, "This is the threshold. Do not go beyond 20 naira, for instance."
Yep.
And the agent says, when buyers come, the agent says it's 45 naira or nothing,
Yep.
right? So and they put up a larger than life, predisposition. So at the end of the day, I think the landlord loses, so to speak, the property owner loses, in cases where maybe it was a distress sale, for instance. So shouldn't there be stricter regulations for realtors, like you mentioned, estate agents operating in the FCT?
You take a percentage of whatever you sell. The higher you sell, the higher your percentage.
Absolutely.
Now, and everybody seeks higher profit. Now, but like everything else, if the housing business is becoming a real business, I think also the private sector should have listing for houses, like every other person has. You list these houses, and then the prices are up there, and then people can compete for the prices. But I mean, when we as I said, we can't regulate the desire to do better. We can't. Everybody aspires to do that. Everybody aspires to do that. Now, but we are not short of regulations, and to over-regulate doesn't make sense.
It could also be a problem.
Our government is capitalistic in nature. The country is set up as a capitalist system. Capitalism is not bad. You can simply just
That's hugely debatable, by the way.
regulate. I think we're capitalist communities. I mean, landlords are capitalists, agents are capitalists, lawyers are
No,
capitalists.
the conversation of capitalism not
Our
being bad.
government is capitalist. They tax us for everything. There are no social nests. Everything is being removed. All subsidies are being taken away. We are a capitalist country, completely capitalist,
All right.
unapologetically capitalist.
Well, we'll wrap it up with the conversation, Mr. Laji. Let's talk about the legal aspect of these conversations because, one of the delight I had talking to you is because you're a legal practitioner and this is a legal matter, take it or leave it. If a tenant, or a potential buyer believes that he's been overcharged for a property,
Okay.
you know where I'm going to, of course.
It's a free market.
No, but-
I'll tell you, it's a free market.
How can they seek professional advice or legal redress, so to speak?
Okay, there are limits to the powers of a tenant. If you look at for an agent, as I said, it will be driven by market. I have clients who won't sell property even when I thought they had a good price. There are clients who I advise not to sell because it will be a bad investment. It's a bad sale. So in all of this, we look out for ourselves. We look out for the people we represent. Now, so it's just an act of the deal. I don't know how you can buy something. As I said, I don't know how you can buy something that belongs to somebody and you determine the outcome. It's just the act of bargain. Of course, I was having a conversation in the office where somebody made us an offer to purchase a property, and I was wondering what was the person offering? Is he offering the property or offering money? and I'm wondering who should offer what for sale. Because if I'm the owner of the property and I want to put it up, I determine the sale
price.
itself, because at the end of the day, it is the object that is up for bargain.
I really want to know, right? Is it legally binding, for the owner of the property to determine the price? I'm asking because some prices, if you place it side by side, of course we don't have market data. We're not there yet as a country to be able to use statistics.
We have passed that. We are
Yeah.
just not doing it.
Unfortunately, we're not
We're
doing
just
it.
not doing it.
To utilize data to be able to value a property. We should be doing that as a
Now,
country.
if we have a reasonable property tax that will accumulate when you keep the property without an income from
Yeah.
it to even pay off your taxes,
Yeah.
it's a waste. But we don't have. We pay nothing in ground rent. We pay nothing in tenement rates.
Absolutely.
There are no incentives to let the property go. So if we can, for example, as a matter of law and policy, determine that if your property stays open without a tenant for this number of time, your tenement rate will go up for non-utilization. Your ground rent will go up for non-utilization, because if you do not lease it, the government does not get the opportunity to pay the tenement rate. So if we put policies that are commonsensical in place, that will encourage people to actually also stay in business and keep generating wealth, we can deal with this. But where there are no consequences and it is cheaper to keep an investment redundant, which is not anything that should be encouraged by any government, you're going to have what we're having.
Right.
But if it is cheaper for you and more profitable to have occupation all the time than to have houses left empty, I'm sure that is sufficient incentive to lower price so that you can cut off on some of your other cost.
Well, I want to really let you go, Mr. Lage, this morning. It's been an exciting conversation, but man, I want to really ask you if you could recommend a major reform to improve the FCT's rental market in light of what we've talked about so far. If you could recommend a major reform, just one, what would it be and why?
Put down 5,000 buses in the FCT. Let there be a bus that leaves in every 10 minutes to any location in the FCT. Believe you me, we will empty the town. We'll empty the city. Nobody will pay the rent we're paying here.
There's no time. I really want to just bite another conversation because over the course of different FCT administrations, we've seen, buses. We've seen some of these transports intervention schemes that are not sustainable. So it is one thing to put them out there. It's a second thing to
They're just
keep
not
them
managed.
there.
I mean, how do these rackety taxes become sustainable and we can have air-conditioned buses that we prefer? Not
Maybe the rackety bus taxis, like you mentioned, are
run by Ghanaians,
run by
Gambians?
private individuals.
Of course, all Nigerians are private individuals. My point is, we are not different from our government. We're not different from my government. I mean, why don't we just lease the buses to these people and just regulate, make sure that you bring 10 of them to do the business, keep the bus, make sure that in every 10 minutes you're in a bus stop, you time in, you time out when you move, regulate it, take the incentive when they're not there. I mean, you can imagine the jobs you create.
Absolutely.
You can imagine the opportunities you create.
As well.
You can imagine the problem you solve in the FCT. You can imagine the safety you can bring to commuters within the FCT by just doing that.
Right. Well, this has been an exciting conversation, Mr. Lagino, and thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And, I would unapologetically agree to your suggestion about buses, because I think that if the city is decongested, so to speak.
I won't also drive to town. You have my words on it. You will have, our roads will last longer.
Yeah, absolutely. The risk of insecurity and all of that.
The filth we throw from the 5-7 people in a cab, if we have bins in the buses, will not also be.
Absolutely. It saves us a lot.
A lot.
Thank
it's
you.
Just one good policy that deals with 100 problems.
Issues.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Lagi Innocent, for being part of the conversation. By the way, Mr. Lagi Innocent Esquire, like we mentioned, he served as Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in Nasarawa State, represented Wamba constituency in the State's House of Assembly, a legal practitioner respected with over 2 decades of experience in law governance and human rights
My opponents will
advocacy.
believe you.
Yo, well, the better believe you. The better believe me, rather. Thank you so much. And of course, this has been the size of the round table this morning on Clean Beats 91.5 FM. Of course, the Clean Slate crew would come up later by 10 o'clock. But of course, do want to enjoy the rest of the day's broadcast and every single thing we have in store for you right here on Clean Beats 91.5 FM. Thank you very much for sticking around. My name is Isaac. Do well to have a beautiful Friday and a lovely weekend ahead.